Ye come from. Right.
That's a good one. I got a million of those. All right.
Got a million.
So, and we'll pray before we get in there. Carol, would you pray for us tonight?
Dear Father, we're so grateful to be here and to hear your word, and I've learned so much from First Samuel, Lord, and I just ask that your awesome message would come to each of us, Lord, and your word is true, every word of it, Lord. It's the only truth we have. Thank you for helping Pastor Scott to give us a wonderful message, and we just give you all the glory and honor, Lord, and thank you so much for the privilege of being here and studying your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, well, if you remember from last week, King David and his men, again, on their constant running away from Saul, they end up back in the territory of King Achish of the Amalekites. And he pretty much says, we don't like Saul, and actually we'd rather be with you and help you. Because, Saul's out to kill me, and so I'll change sides. I'm defecting, right? It's like the Russian who leaves the Soviet Union, they defect, they come to the United States. And so here is King David and his men saying to this king, Achish, that they're defecting. And David proves himself in a very sly way. Remember what he does? He goes out on these raids. He says, okay, well, king, I'm going to go raid, an Israelite tribe. And I'll come back, when it's done. And they come back with all this stuff. Booty, right? Loot. And King Achish says, David, who did you beat up this time? And he gives some name. But actually, it was simply another Canaanite village or something, of which, again, the Amalekites are part of the massive number of nations that made up the Canaanite territory. And so, David was just really good at, I guess, eliminating everybody that would have had a big mouth and would have snitched on him. David and his men did a very thorough job of doing this. And in fact, we're going to find out they end up doing this for quite some time. Exactly how long, we don't know, but it's years. Did you know that? Did you know that King David and 600 men and their families lived with the Amalekites for years? And they were continuing the work that Saul should have been doing, that in the days of Joshua the tribes should have been doing, and David's doing. Just whittling away, bit by bit, just kind of thorn in everybody's side. So how he kept that, that king duped for all those years is quite amazing. But here we go. First two verses, somebody.
In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, you must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army. And David said, then you will see for yourself what your servant can do. Achish replied, very well, and I will make you my bodyguard for life.
Okay, so all the armies of the various cities and regions of Palestine, right? Remember, don't forget, when you see the Philistines, that's actually how today we'd say Palestine, right? So Goliath was a Palestinian, right? So all these armies, they all come together. They go, okay, we're gonna fight Israel. And what does King Achish say to David? You're gonna ride out with me, because he sees David as a trusted ally. All right, buddy, let's fight together. And David says, hey, now you get to see in person what a great fighter I am. It's very interesting. He goes, man, now this will be a treat for you, because you've never been able to see me fight, actually. So wait till you see this. Now, that's an interesting thing that he said. And Achish trusts David so much that he appoints David's men as his royal bodyguard. He didn't even have his own men guarding him. Well, think about this. This is how persuasive David was. That the king goes, David and his men, they are my bodyguard. Not even Amalekite men. It's Hebrew men. And here we go, verses 3 to 7, somebody.
Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all the Israelites and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." "There is one in Endor," they said.
All right, you got the scene here. All right. Verse 3, says Samuel, he's a spiritual leader. Again, remember, he was the Billy Graham of his day. He's dead. He was the guy you went to talk to God, to get instructions. Do we fight? Do we not fight? He's not there. This is now a national crisis. There's no spiritual authority. It says that whenever Saul tried to inquire of the Lord, he received no answer, right? No answer by any of the usual means of revelation, dreams. No prophet's going to talk to him. No priest is going to inform him. Or it says Urim, okay? And the Urim and the Thummim, you've heard about that before? It shows up in the scriptures and you go, what is that? It's a little strange. In fact, Joseph Smith of the Mormon fame claims that he used the Urim and the Thummim to translate these tablets, whatever, into the Book of Mormon. Well, first off, what they were, the priest would wear them in a little bag on his chest. There were two disc-like things, white on one side, black on the other side. He'd roll them like dice, so to speak, out of his bag. If they landed both white up, it was yes. The answer was yes. Lord, should we fight the Amalekites today? Boop. Yes. Both down, black side up? No. One white, one black? Wait. That was it. And they trusted it. And, do you think God worked with us?
Can. God can work with
Verdict is
anything.
out, but when you look at the whole record, it appeared he did. He also, worked with Gideon in a fleece. And I guess if he wants to kind of supernaturally flip the little dice a certain way, because if that's how they understood, if that's how he was communicating, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. And so what happens is that, he goes, pretty much, give me a witch. See, if I can't get an answer from God, I will go to the devil himself. You know how many people do that? When you hear about somebody sells their soul to the devil, it's because they've tried the God thing, and God is not going to give you whatever you want. No. And it's the people that end up, you hear rock stars doing it. Right? I remember back in the years ago, I always hear, so-and-so sold their soul to the devil, and they're public about it. And they say, well, yeah, because I prayed for God to make me famous and give me this and give me a record contract, and he didn't do it. And the moment I prayed to Satan, hey, all of a sudden I'm signed with Sony Records. The devil would love to answer those kind of prayers. God loves you too much to answer those kind of prayers. God knows what can be dangerous for you and what can happen to you if you become rich and famous. Especially in Hollywood or whatnot. So, either way, that's what Saul does. This is human nature. I'm going to get an answer from somebody, even if it's what God forbids. And of course, you can imagine he's probably got something against God, because God has talked to him through Samuel, the late Samuel, that you're on God's bad list. Right? God removed his spirit from Saul, and so he asks for a witch. So he tells his guys, go get me a medium, a psychic, we'd say today. Go find one. Now, it's a little hard to find one because he ran him off. Because when he was following the Lord, he kicked them all out. Saul did. Saul said, no witches allowed, none of this stuff. Off you go. Drive you out of the land. But some were still there. Some stayed around anyway and were most probably practicing their little secret occultic arts in secret. And now, this is a very interesting passage, often misunderstood, and I hope to help shed some light on what exactly is happening here from verses 8 to 25. Who wants to take on that big chapter, that passage there, 8 to 25?
From 8?
Yeah.
Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment, and he went and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night, and he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring him up, whom I shall name unto thee. And the woman said unto Saul, Behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that had familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die? And Saul sware to her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. Then said the woman, Whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, Bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, Be not afraid, for what seest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? And she said, Old man cometh up. He is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground, and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, Why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me, and answered me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. And Samuel said, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me? Seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy. And the Lord hath done to him as he spake by me, for the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thy hand, and given it to thy neighbor, and even to David. Because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the hosts of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. Then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night.
All right, so now, did y'all follow along in your own versions? Because I know the Victorian English of the King James can be a little, can lose you, but y'all got it, right? Y'all heard it? Okay, so you got the picture. Saul is told where this medium is, this witch. She's in Endor. Now there happens to be a planet, don't confuse it with a planet in Star Wars. There's a planet Endor. So the witch is the person he's going to consult, and what does he do? He disguises himself. He goes at nighttime because he doesn't want to be seen. Right? Because he cannot be seen consulting the very person he ran out of the land, right? And he asks her pretty much to channel Samuel for him. And just so you don't get the wrong idea about the story nor the power of psychics, it says that she saw the spirit of an old man with a robe coming up from the ground. And then she speaks for Samuel. Okay? And as soon as Saul... it says, what's it look like? Because she says, I see this this being rising up out of the ground, and well, what's he look like? And he says, oh, it's Samuel. Okay? Now, that's who he wants to talk to. So he's already looking for a bear in the dark, let's say. But that's what he wants. And he just feels that's her. And the witch called it a divine being, or the supernatural being. And it says that Saul knew that this was the spirit of Samuel. And in respect to the prophet Samuel, or out of respect, Saul bows before Samuel, he falls on the ground. And then supposedly Samuel speaks this ominous prophetic word to the king. He announces a judgment. Did you catch it? He talks about this violence coming, this battle in the kingdom that's going to tear the kingdom from Saul's hand. It's going to be given to David. And this Samuel who's speaking is reminding Saul of a past conversation that they had about Saul and his sons. And it's very interesting that this Samuel also says, pretty much by tomorrow at this time, you and your sons will be with me in Sheol. What means what?
Good.
Okay, you're going to die on the battlefield, you and your son. Saul is now filled with fear. And this lady's now looking at him, and she says, I risked my life helping you out. And I think she's afraid he's going to croak right there on the floor. And so she begs him, you need to eat something, because who knows what he looked like, but he hasn't been eating for a while. Because when you're nervous and you're scared and you're having a hard time, you don't eat, you lose your appetite. Okay. So Saul's having a hard time because he's spiritually detached from God, if he's really aware of that or not. He now knows there's a massive army that there's no way that he can fight. And he knows, I'm sure deep in his knower, that he's doing something wrong. He's consulting this witch. And he just heard what he believes from Samuel. And Samuel's never been wrong. That he and his sons are going to die on the battlefield tomorrow. If you heard from somebody you believe in, you believe has always told you the truth, that you're going to be dead tomorrow, you and your kids, how would you feel?
Like you're going to be dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay? All right? And so here this witch looks at him, and I think she's just looking at the situation, and she begs him to eat something, because I think she's literally saying, you look terrible. This is, however bad, just imagine what Saul must be like at this moment. Saul has now lived for a long time in rebellion to God. Saul, for a long time, has been possessed by an evil spirit. How many times have we seen this in the chapter? What do you think Saul looks like? Remember when Saul was first chosen? Samuel goes, look at that guy. He's head and shoulders above the rest. He's like a Brian Filer, real tall, right? And he goes, he looks presidential. And I wonder what he looks like now.
Maybe like a meth addict.
Like a meth addict. Right? You've seen people who've been used and abused by the devil himself. Right? And if you or yourself or somebody else has been living in willful evil, you change. And meth addict's a good description. The witch looks at him and says, y'all need to eat something quick, because I don't want you to die on me. And so what she does, she goes and kills a cow that she's got. So she feeds him and his servants a bunch of steak. And I guess they've got enough nutrients to get up and go back home. Now I want to ask you, how well do you think Saul slept that night? He probably didn't get a wink of sleep. Now I want you to compare that to Peter. Remember when Peter was in prison in the book of Acts? And he was told, tomorrow we're going to kill you. But tonight we're going to handcuff you to these 2 centurions. And you just, sleep well, buddy. And it says actually that Peter slept well. In fact, Peter was sound asleep. Even though he knows the next day he's going to be killed. That was the plan. But he is sound asleep. so sound asleep that an angel comes to wake him, right, to lead him out of the prison. The angel has to hit him. Literally it says the angel doesn't tap him. The angel, hey, Peter. Peter. And you ever try to wake up somebody who's, sound asleep. Sometimes literally you can, buddy, you gotta wake up. And the angel, you go, Peter! He wakes up. Now why was he sleeping so well on the night before his execution? Because he knows where he's going. Do you have that kind of faith? Could you sleep like that all night if you knew the next day you're going to be dead?
Yep, I think I could.
That could be tough.
I think I could.
But remember, Peter lived with Jesus, ministered alongside, watched, touched everything, restored to ministry after denying him, the whole thing, saw him resurrected. Peter has a faith the likes of which we just wish we had. And so he goes, tomorrow I'm going home. Tomorrow I'm seeing Jesus. I'm going to sleep. It's the last time I'm going to sleep on earth. Might as well get a good one. Because you ain't going to be sleeping in heaven. So think about it. I'm going to wring this sponge. I'm going to get some sleep. And here is Saul. There's no way he's sleeping. His life couldn't be any more different than Peter's. And now I'm going to ask you this. Was this being that the witch supposedly summoned up actually Samuel? How do you interpret this passage?
Well, I've always kind of wondered about it because, does a witch have that much power?
Well, the
Maybe
demonic
it's
only has as much power as God lets him have.
Okay.
So she saw Samuel.
Okay.
God can use him if he wants. He can use that woman to do what he wanted to do. Because that's what Saul was looking for.
Okay. I want to ask you one thing. Who is writing this right now?
I've wondered about that.
See, again, what we believe is that Samuel did a lot of the writing in the beginning, but then he dies, so somebody else took over the writing. So who's writing about Samuel dying and then being summoned by this witch? I'm gonna make a guess here. Okay, but I'm gonna tell you in just a moment. I'm gonna tell you in a moment. Maybe I won't.
Just tell us.
No. So,
Yeah, right. Just
but I
tell
want you to
us.
think this. Now listen, look again. Verse 15. Then Samuel said to Saul,
Then Samuel
okay,
said
because
to
whoever's writing this down believes that, well, Samuel actually was brought up out of the, from the dead by this witch. Whoever's writing this now, the last few chapters of Samuel, Then Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Hey, I was sleeping, right? Saul answered, I'm in great distress, blah, 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 blah. Samuel said, why then do you ask me, since the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy? Yeah, that might sound like something Samuel would have said. Okay. The Lord has done to you just as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek, the guy that you're going to go to war with tomorrow, that King David is actually working with. Therefore, the Lord has done this thing to you today. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistine. I want to ask you a question. Since when can a witch order a prophet to do anything? Let alone pull this godly man's spirit out of heaven. In Old Testament it would be Hades, right? The penthouse of Hades. Remember how this goes? Okay. Anybody curious about? Anybody have a question about
Yes,
heaven and hell?
go ahead.
Okay. The heaven and the hell that Jesus talks about and the Bible primarily refers to and that we're going to live in forever and ever does not yet exist. Ask a Jew. Hades exists. There is a penthouse and a basement in what is called Hades, or Sheol, the grave. It's the afterlife. Remember, Jesus even said, when he talks about the story of this rich man and Lazarus, who was begging outside the rich man's gate, and they both died one day, and the Lazarus was carried to Abraham's side, and Lazarus was sent, the rich man, did I say it right? Lazarus was carried to the rich
Lazarus.
Lazarus was carried to Abraham's side.
Yes. The rich man.
The rich man was carried to Hades, the basement of it. And this is what you need to understand. Because we have Christianized what the scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, tell us about what is after this life. And Jesus says there's a great chasm fixed between the two, and they can't cross. But apparently there was some conversation.
You can see.
Remember that? Because then the point comes when you look at the end of Revelation that death and Hades is thrown into the lake of fire.
Yes.
Now that is hell. The lake of fire is hell. And then there is the heaven, which is heaven coming to earth. That's Revelation 21:22. And it is the joining of two dimensions. The dimension God resides in now that we usually call heaven. Okay? It's okay to use it. You might say it's synonymous. But it's not the heaven that is going to be forever and ever and ever and ever and ever without end. Got it? And the hell right now that people are in is not the hell that people will be in forever and ever and ever, called the lake of fire. Got it? All right. With that, somehow this witch has authority over the dead. Somehow a witch could summon Samuel, the prophet of God, from his so-called rest.
Don't think so.
And obviously it's against his will. Samuel's going, why'd you wake me? I was doing just great. I was getting a good nap. Literally, he says, why'd you do that? As if it is against his will that this witch, who is, working for Saul, a rebellious, prideful, demon-possessed king. Who has the power to bring up a spirit from the dead? Who?
Jesus.
Is there anybody else who has the power to do that?
Nope.
Well, he gave that power to Paul.
Does Paul have that power?
In and of himself, no.
No.
Who has the power to bring somebody back from the dead?
Jesus.
God.
Only God has that power.
God.
So the witch does not have this kind of power. Okay, so what is the witch perhaps seeing? Let me ask you this. Was this Samuel actually the evil spirit that God had sent to torment Saul?
Could have been.
Is this part of the demonic thing that is happening in Saul's life?
Could very well be.
Not necessarily.
He is being deceived.
Yeah.
He's being set up.
Is God using Saul's evil search against him?
Yeah. Could be. Turning him over to himself.
Here's news for you. Saul is not going to be with the real Samuel in death. The Samuel that spoke here said, hey, tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me.
Right.
Okay? Because Saul assuredly is headed to the basement of Hades along with this demon Samuel that I think is speaking. Which is why the demon Samuel says, tomorrow you'll be with me. And it's actually a demon. It's not actually Samuel. Samuel's in the penthouse. Saul is not going to go to the penthouse. Jonathan, Saul's son, when he dies, I think he's going to end up with Samuel in the penthouse. What do you think? Okay, so the witch unknowingly messes with a demon because that's what they do. Watch. Don't look for spiritual truth with people who are spiritually deceived.
Right.
Don't ask a psychic for something from God. You're not going to get it. They don't have the relationship from God to get something from God. A psychic does not have access to truth. What they're going to get is something from the demonic. So she channels this mimicking Samuel, and that's the case, I believe, with all psychic encounters.
She says it, all she says that she describes him as an old man wearing a robe.
That's all she saw.
She did call it divine.
And they Saul filled in the rest. Listen, psychics apparently, they supposedly speak to happy dead non-Christians all the time. You hearing this? You hearing this? Psychics claim, it's on the shows, it's what it is. Supposedly, they are, every time they contact somebody for somebody else who's not a Christian, when they talk to the person or get information, that dead person who's not a Christian is happy. And if you are dead and happy, you're not a Christian.
No,
Not happy.
the other way around.
Happy.
The
If
other
you're
way
dead,
around.
if you're dead and not a Christian and happy, then what? What are you? Where are you? You're a lying spirit. So a lying spirit will say, I am happy in this afterlife. And speaking for the person who's not a Christian. Does it make sense? They're a fraud, because hell is not a happy place.
Right.
But these channeled spirits of the dearly departed always assure their living loved one that all is well with them in the afterlife. And what does that do? What does that lead to? It leads to somebody not needing to find Jesus. Oh, I don't need this Jesus. I don't need Christianity. I'm fine because my whoever is happy. They just communicated with me through the psychic, and they're not a Christian. So something great awaits for me, and then it leads this person to die without Christ. Uh-oh. Welcome to the spiritual war again over humankind.
Another battlefront.
Right? Right?
I have a question, Why would, if this was a divine lying spirit, why would a spirit like that speak the truth? Why not say, go forward to battle, the Lord is with you? Unless God is directing the spirit to speak the truth. Or, because the devil never speaks the truth. He tries, but...
He speaks at least half-truths. Sometimes maybe 99% truths.
But it's in the details.
Well, we learned that.
Because it'll use anything, the demonic will use anything to win your allegiance. Even saying something that I would say the demonic knows. They're just simply saying what they already know. So I think whatever demon this is already knows what's going to happen to Saul. And says it.
And the demons can only do what God says they can do. We learned that in Job.
Yes,
That even
by
Satan
permission.
has to answer to God.
Yeah, right.
So they can only say what God allows them to say.
Yes. Yes. And I know we talked about that at length on some past nights. So I'd simply say it's quite literally a life in the pit of hell to keep you from seeking a Savior from the perishing that Jesus says happens to those that do not come to Him. And so, chapter 29. Are we good with 28?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody first 5 verses, please.
Then the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Apec, and the Israelites encamped by a fountain which is called Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and thousands. But David and his men passed in review at the near of Achish. When the prince of the Philistines said, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" And Achish said, "The princess of the Philistines is not David, the servant of Saul the king of Israel, who has been with me these days, or these years. And to this day I have found no fault in him, since he defected to me. But the princes of the Philistines were angry with him. So the princes of the Philistines said to him, make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place where you have appointed for him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become our adversary. For what could he reconcile himself of this master, if not with the heads of these men? It is not David of whom they sang to one another in dances. Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
Okay, what happens here?
There's some jealousy.
They went, yeah.
Well, the Philistines, they gather their forces at Aphek, and the Philistine commanders, they're very uncomfortable with this little personal detachment, the bodyguard of King Achish, right? They go, whoa, what are they doing here? And they're in the rear. And they're questioning the wisdom of Achish, right? And Achish defends and he praises David. He said, listen, David's been living with me for years at this point. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
He's been with me for years. Pretty much like, trust me, guys, if he weren't legit, he would have turned on me by now. But these guys say, listen, buddy, what lemonade you drink, right? And says, is this not the David that everybody talks about, who's killed the thousands and the 10,000? Isn't this the guy? You actually have our history's greatest enemy right here on the battlefield, right here next to us. What if they turn on us? This is a special ops team. This is Navy SEALs. You got the Navy SEALs of the Jews right here, dude. You gotta be kidding me. So they put some pressure on him, and what's he do? He dismisses David. David, you imagine he goes back to David, buddy, I'm sorry, listen, I try to convince these guys that, hey, you're one of us, but, they're just uncomfortable with you being here. They don't know you like I know you. So, hate to tell you, but, go home. You guys we got this. But, thanks for being willing. Ruh-roh. Now watch this. 6 to the end, somebody.
So Achish finally summoned David and said to him, I swear by the Lord that you have been a trustworthy ally. I think you should go with me into battle, for I have never found a single flaw in you from the day you arrived until today. But the other Philistine rulers won't hear of it. Please don't upset them, but go back quietly. What I have done to deserve this treatment, David demanded. What have I ever found in your servant? What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight the enemies of my lord the king? But Achish insisted, as far as I'm concerned, you're as perfect as an angel of God. But the Philistine commanders are afraid to have you with them in battle. Now get up early in the morning and leave with your men as soon as it gets light. So David and his men headed back into the land of the Philistines, while the Philistine army went on to Jezreel.
Okay, so there's a conversation, and you can imagine that conversation taking place. Achish goes, David, man, listen, I tried. David goes, okay, I'm sorry, man, it hurts my feelings. What did I ever do? That would cause anybody to question my motives. I want to be part of this fight. Very interesting. He's staying with this thing. And chances are, because David's thinking, he's already got a plan of what he will do. Chances are he was planning on turning somewhere in the battle. But now look, chapter 30, somebody first 6 verses, please.
David and his men reached Ziklag on the 3rd day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev at Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the woman and all that were in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men came to Ziklag, They found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's 2 wives had been captured. What's her name?
I know.
And Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters, but David found strength in the Lord his God.
All right. So then notice this. Okay, the trip back to Ziklag, this stronghold that is usually called, where David and his now 600 men are camping out. Okay, and there seems to be some, other folks there. They're not maybe the only people there. But when they get back, what do they see?
It's been ruined. Everybody's gone.
With the Amalekites. Okay, Gath. Achish is the king of Gath. Gath is Amalekite territory. Other Amalekites just raided David's compound and took what? All the women and children.
Everyone living.
All the livestock. All the possessions. There's nothing left.
But only his compound.
Definitely, yeah. But, and whoever else, because it appears to be later as we read, whoever was living in that area, they got raided. That's what happened. All the stuff was taken. So,
But they were after David.
I would definitely say they were after David.
Sending him a message.
Okay? And it would probably be Amalekites that did not trust Achish's, naivety, you might say, over David. So, they're all kidnapped. I want you to imagine the agony that David is feeling. And then there are murmuring troops, okay? Who are like, why didn't we stay? Maybe that was a bad idea to go out there because we left everybody vulnerable and now everybody's gone. It's very interesting. But David strengthens himself in the Lord his God. Now that's a sentence a lot of us quote, but this is where it's found. David encouraged himself or strengthened himself in the Lord. Well, this is where and why, and this is the right time to do that. And now watch what happens. Somebody please read 7 to 10.
Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. To what?
To 10.
Okay. David and the 600 men went with him came to the Besar ravine, where some stayed behind. For 200 men were too exhausted to cross the ravine. But David and the 400 men continued the pursuit.
All right, so remember we talked about Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, who was killed, right, by Doeg, Saul's henchman.
Yep.
And so the son is the first priest, let's say working for David. He's David's priest. And is going to be a priest when Jerusalem is and the temple is starting to get put together. All right, and here is David compared to Saul. Saul asks a witch for to get some spiritual truth. What's going to happen with the battlefield here tomorrow? David goes directly to God. Remember, he has an interesting way that he does it compared to anybody else. He includes the priest, but he doesn't have the priest do it for him. But it's like he's with the priest, like let's seek God together, but David does the talking like directly to God. And again, the Lord appears to answer David directly.
He throws the stuff himself.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
didn't ask the priest to do it, he did it
Yeah,
himself.
he does, right? And then what else do you find what happens here. Okay, this was a 3-day march, it said. Remember, verse 1 of chapter 30. On the third day, okay, so it took them, there are no trains. I doubt there's horses for all these guys. Most armies in the day, they were foot soldiers. They marched. 3 days. They already marched 3 days to the battlefield to march 3 days back. Now I want to ask you, how hungry would you be? How tired would you be? How thirsty would you be? No Arby's and whatever on the way. And, you got a certain amount of provisions. And I just don't know how many provisions these guys have. But what we know is this, 200 of the guys are just literally can't go, right?
Yeah.
What's it say?
We can't cross the brook.
They don't have the strength to cross the river. They're literally saying, I am so exhausted. Now I want you to think about this. I think there's two things that added to their exhaustion. One is clear, one I think is not. One is, not everybody can have the same stamina. Some people have, there's 400 soldiers that can keep going. 200 of them, not even the knowledge that their wives and kids have been stolen, kidnapped, who knows what is happening to them, imagine their imaginations. That can't even summon the strength within them to get up and keep going, to ford the river and to keep walking all the way to where they're going to end up engaging the enemy. I mean, think about how tired you must be. I'm sure they're starving. They're literally, they just can't move. Emotionally, I think when they got there, they're already like dragging themselves into town. They then find out they just got raided. You know what happens to you up here and in here? When you get that kind of news?
That grief. Oh.
You turn to butter. I mean, it's like, there's nothing left. And they literally cannot summon the strength to keep going. And you know what's killing them that they can't. They want to, but they can't. Because sometimes that's how it is. And so David goes, hey, we got it. We got it. Me and 400 guys, we'll get it. The rest of you guys, you stay with the baggage, so to speak. And then, do we keep going? Somebody, 11 to 15.
They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, to whom do you belong, and where do you come from? He said, I'm an Egyptian, a slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev for the Kerethites and the territory belonging to Judah and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag. David asked him, can you lead me down to this raiding party?
Okay.
You want me to keep going or not? He answered, swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them.
Okay, you got it? What happened here? On their way we're going to go find the Amalekites, we're going to find out where they are, and they come across what? An Egyptian slave of one of the Amalekites who's barely alive himself, who has been there for 3 days without food or water. Good. He's kind of like the 200 left back with the baggage.
Yeah.
So, hey, who's this guy? They bring him to David. Maybe this guy could tell us something. Give him something, to wet his whistle. Hey, squeak out something. The guy goes, I got sick. I got COVID-19. Or no, negative 19, BC. And he goes, and so they left me here to die in the desert. And David goes, pretty much fill me in. Well, we did this, and we burnt Ziklag. Huh. Yeah, well, that's why I'm here with my boys. Can you lead me there? Yeah. I'll do it if you promise not to kill me. Don't hand me back to my master, please. All right. So I'm sure he earned himself a little Egyptian soldier somewhere down the road once the guy got strong again. And he's going to lead him to the camp. So, it's 16 to the end, somebody.
He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until evening of the next day, and none of them got away except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all of the flocks and herds, and his men drove ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him, and who were left behind in the Bezor ravine. They came out to meet David and the people with him. As David and his men approached, he greeted them. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his own wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and handed over to us the forces that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the men who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike." David made this a statute and an ordinance for Israel from that day to this.
All right. So this Egyptian slave, he leads them to the campsite of the Amalekite raiders, and he comes on them, and it's nighttime, and what are they doing?
Partying.
They're partying. Right? They're eating, they're drinking, they're dancing all over the place. Just look what we did, ha! Now, this is interesting. Nobody's raping anybody. Nothing like that is happening, which would be actually quite common. So I think they're being protected. And they pretty much, I'm sure, kind of just corralled everybody where they wanted them. Here's all the money and the animals and livestock, put that where they want, and they're just having a great old time. And David launches this night attack and chases them down until evening the next day. And verse 19 said they recovered what?
Everything. Everything, everyone.
Everyone, everything.
Plus booty.
Nothing was missing. Now, what do you think about that? Here we go, my pocket knife back. I mean, everything. I mean, there's not a thing that's missing. That's pretty spectacular, isn't it? And then what you see is verse 22, 24. Some of the soldiers, ironically, they're called corrupt and worthless, whatever. They go, hey, it's only right that we keep all the possessions of the guys that didn't come out to this fight. They can have their women and their children back. We don't want that. But we want their stuff. That'll be payment enough for us, David says.
No.
No, it's not how it's going to come. It's interesting that, you know, the worthless, corrupt men are, you know, they're the ones calling the 200 exhausted guys worthless. And then let me just summarize 26 to 31. You look at it, and I'm simply going to tell you that what David also does, he sends part of the spoil to all the elders of all the towns that he and his men had passed through to this point, where apparently they received some support and some protection. Got it? That was nice. He shared some of the bounty. And not only, you know, did they get their own stuff back, you know they took some of the Amalekite stuff too. Right? So, and they just, they shared the wealth, spread the wealth. Now I want to ask you this as we close. What would have happened if King Achish didn't dismiss David and his men from the battle?
Oh, the wives would have been lost. They might have caught up to him.
They might not have caught up.
Might have lost the wives, the kids, the stuff for good.
And they may have had to fight their own brethren.
To keep up the facade, yeah. I wonder how many of those men would have died.
Yeah.
David's men. He would have taken casualties. Isn't it interesting? God spared the lives of all the men and all the women and children.
Yep.
Now, think about it. Look at the bigger story.
The bigger story.
You've got,
Preserved Israel.
right? So one thing's for sure. They wouldn't have discovered that their wives and children and belongings had just been captured. That is why they were dismissed. Achish didn't even know that. David didn't know it. I wonder when David figured that out. That was a God thing. And I simply want to say, don't be quick to be disappointed when you're uninvited to something.
Yeah.
Amen.
We are quick to interpret, I might even say misinterpret things, because we don't have the whole story. And there are divine closed doors.
Yes, there are.
This is one of them.
Yes, there are.
And that's the glorious thing is, not one of his men died, apparently. And none of the wives and kids died. They got all their stuff back. And you imagine when they finally, it doesn't say they sat down and finally realized, wow, look what God did for us. But I'm sure that they did.
Or at least David did.
Yeah, at least David did. Can you imagine that? All right, it's 8:05. Any other thoughts? Or we'll save 31 for next week.